everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us. We are everywhere. That way, we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about animation and the fantastic Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host for this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And welcome to 2023. But we still have some unfinished business from the last year, including the fantastic new sequel to 2011's Puss in Boots. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Now, it has been 11 years since the last movie, and animation has changed in the last 11 years. Wouldn't you agree?
Very much so. It's been a wild ride through the evolution of 2D and CGI animation since the last time we have left off in the Shrek universe. We had, the first one in 2001, which is showing its age and some of the production stories behind it, but it's still pretty solid. You can't really get rid of its influence of how it changed animation back then.
Of course not.
Then we had Shrek 2, which improved upon everything that the first one did. And then the third one walked backwards and is the weakest one of the bunch. And the fourth one was better than the third, but not as good as the second. And then in 2011, we just got Puss in Boots because, of course, sooner or later, Puss in Boots was going to get his own movie. And then after that, everything just sort of went quiet. I mean, you had your occasional special or Netflix series with Puss in Boots, which had Eric Bauza as the titular character, and he does a great job with taking up the mantle after Antonio Banderas.
He is a very good voice match for really any character, but particularly for Puss in Boots.
And then, of course, after Universal bought DreamWorks, there was always this looming quote-unquote threat of, we'll bring him back. It just depends on what's going to happen. And, since the last Puss in Boots film came out, there was always talks about a sequel. And, well, they didn't really go at it until they had a good story to tell. That's one of the things. They didn't want to just do a sequel for the sake of brand recognition, because they could have easily done that. Well, we've already seen what happens with that, with either the Disney direct-to-video films or when a sequel comes out and everyone's just like, why? Well, it was originally supposed to come out last year, but then switched places with Boss Baby for its sequel. Honestly, 2022 was the year for DreamWorks. I mean, yes, you can argue that they didn't have a bad 2021. They just made movies you didn't care for. But when you compare 2021 to 2022, even though 2021 still had some fantastic flavor in its animation with Boss Baby Family Business, 2022 with its combo of The Bad Guys and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, this was a stellar year for the studio. And for the director Joel Crawford, who directed The Croods: A New Age, which was my favorite DreamWorks film of 2020.
That one was really good. And this movie just kind of reaffirms the take that I usually have about DreamWorks, is that they always slay it when it comes to sequels.
I wouldn't say always. I think sometimes their sequels falter a little in one way or another, but they're pretty decent.
They have a better batting average than most studios.
I will agree with that. For those that were at Animation is Film, you were able to see the first uncut 30 minutes of this movie, up from Puss in Boots at the mayor's mansion to him going to find Jack Horner to get the wishing star map. And it was a delight. Joel was there, and I think the writers, story, producer, head of animation and such were there. And they talked about the behind the scenes stuff of making this movie, and it was a great time to talk with him, and I took a picture with Joel and told him that I really loved The Croods: A New Age and thought it was delightful and funny, because it is. When the trailers for Puss in Boots: The Last Wish came out, everyone was like, oh, they're doing the Spider-Verse thing with its more painted, expressive art style, and sometimes lowering the frame rate for certain sequences. Which, at this point, I'm fine with. Everyone should be happy about that. I don't care if studios are trying to do what Spider-Verse did with their visual presentation. We've had nonstop good results of that happening.
I was just going to point out that, the first Spider-Verse came out long enough ago that it is a very tangible influence for future filmmakers out there.
I mean, like, DreamWorks was an innovator too. How many films tried to have that snark or sass of Shrek, like during the early to mid 2000s? There were a ton of parodies, a ton of films that tried to ape off of the Shrek vibe and tone. After a while, it's just like, okay, well, it wasn't working. So now here it's like, I'm pretty okay with everyone taking inspiration from Spider-Verse, because that's what everyone says. It's like, can we do this? Then Spider-Verse comes out, and then the studio execs are like, yes, we can. But let's talk about the movie itself, which, came out, and yeah, this was just great. I think this is DreamWorks' best film, maybe in a good while. As much as I love The Croods: A New Age, I mean, like, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is like up there with, I think, the Kung Fu Panda trilogy as DreamWorks' best movie.
Yeah, hard to disagree. I'd say I need to see it at least one or two more times before I can officially put it in that Hall of Fame, but it's at least as good, especially in certain parts, with Kung Fu Panda 2, How to Train Your Dragon 2, and obviously The Prince of Egypt. That's good company to be in.
And the fact that it's just a spin-off of the franchise that spawned the character. And I'd argue it's the best movie in the Shrek franchise. Like, as much as I like 2, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish just does everything that the franchise has needed to do better. It has better writing, better story, better characters, better themes and morals, better jokes, much darker jokes, but we'll get into that with some of the delightful instances of whoa, you can't believe they put that in there. And I really mean it, that it's like, wow, I'm shocked someone at DreamWorks said, yeah, we can put that in there. The animation just looks amazing. It's like, finally, Puss in Boots does not have to be strapped down to the Shrek visual style. Like, he still looks like Puss in Boots. Not much has changed from a character design perspective. But the humans look better. The world around Puss in Boots looks better. It still takes place within a universe of Shrek, but it would not have looked as good if they kept the 2010 visual look of Shrek Forever After, with the pseudo hyper realistic look of the humans that really clashed with the more cartoony movements and such. Here, nothing felt out of place. But again, sorry, this tangent. Let's talk about what actually happens with Puss in Boots. So we see our brave, courageous hero, Puss in Boots, voiced once again by Antonio Banderas. And after partying with the townsfolk and taking care of a giant, before he's about to sing another, I'm sure, toe-tapping tune, he dies. I mean, that's not a spoiler. That's the entire reason how the story starts off. Puss wakes up by the help of the town's doctor, barber, dentist, veterinarian, and such, voiced by Anthony Mendez, and tells him, you've died. And then Puss in Boots is like, relax, I am Puss in Boots. I have 9 lives. And the doctor's like, okay, well, how many times have you died? And then Puss in Boots goes through the 8 different times up to this point that he's died, which I thought were all very creative. What did your audience think about when they showed the cameo of the gingerbread man character from Shrek? Did your audience get a huge reaction to it, or
There was some laughter during that scene. That was one of the moments that popped off.
Because that was like one of the biggest reactions that we got when I was at Animation is Film was seeing Gingy there. And because, like Shrek is an old franchise now. I mean, it's weird to think about that. It's relatively new as a franchise. Like the first movie's 20 years old.
It's old enough to drink now.
Yeah, it's wild to think about. And I could just feel myself growing a beard and being cranky and old. Just thinking about that. Anyway, so Puss is like, yeah, I'm fine. I don't need to be careful. I'm Puss in Boots. I'm great. Until he meets the wolf, voiced by Wagner Moura, who a lot of people would know from Netflix's Narcos as Pablo Escobar, who is at first just seems like a bounty hunter and not really connected to any specific fairy tale. I was wondering what was going to happen at that point. And this was before I saw the movie and we knew what Wolf's origin is. Because I was like, is this a new take on the Red Riding Hood wolf? Or is this just like another wolf from like yet another fairy tale? Because this movie uses both like fairy tales, but also the Brothers Grimm style of fairy tales. Puss loses the fight. And it's a great fight. They've really upped their action quota from the previous film. DreamWorks, I think, does a lot of things that studios are pseudo struggling with at points. Like, I think they do action scenes better than Disney. Not that people at Disney don't know what they're doing. I mean, at all of these studios, there are such amazing people working there.
DreamWorks just happens to have carved a niche for great animated action sequences.
Exactly. So Puss goes into hiding at Mama Luna's when he gets then named. It's like, your name's Pickles. Great name for a cat. And as he just basically lives his days there, I don't know how much time passes, but obviously enough for him to grow a beard. He encounters a little dog disguised as a cat there named Palito, voiced by Harvey Gillen from What We Do in the Shadows fame. While he's there and just kind of chatting, like living his life in a very kind of like, I'm done. I just want to sleep, eat, and whatever, waste away. They get a lovely little encounter from Goldilocks and the Three Bears, who are voiced by Florence Pugh as Goldilocks. Mama Bear is voiced by Olivia Colman. Papa Bear is voiced by Ray Winston. And Baby Bear is voiced by Samson Kaye. And they're looking for Puss in Boots to help them find the wishing star map that'll take them to a wishing star, and then they can have whatever wish they want granted. Puss uses that inspiration to get back on his feet, well, get back in his boots, and go on another hair-raising adventure to get his wish granted to get his 9 lives back, while avoiding people like Goldilocks, Jack Horner, a character who has a collection of magical items, voiced by John Mulaney, the wolf himself, and what other personal challenges may come his way, with also getting the help of Perrito and Kitty Softpaws, voiced by Selma Hayek. So, some of the greatest first 30 minutes in animation this year.
Yeah, that is one hell of a setup.
They put in a lot, and it's so stylish. I love the new art direction that they've taken with this franchise, because on the surface, like I said, Puss and Kitty Softpaws still look like they do from the 2011 film, but they've kind of like done little small tweaks to everyone to like update it for a franchise that has been dormant for the most part for a good decade. And the visual style, just I love the painted look on everything.
This is some of the best animation that I've seen from the Shrek franchise specifically, but even just in DreamWorks over like the past 10 or so years, they went all out with the art style here. And I love the choice to, once they find the map, and it shows the path for like each character. This is when they bring out some of the most creative visuals.
That's true because for a lot of like the franchise, it was very much just this is a world where all the fairy tale characters exist. And if we want to do something creative with it, we will, but it kind of ranges from movie to movie. With Shrek 2 taking probably the most advantage of its world outside of this movie. And I like the human designs in this film. I think after 2010 and 2011, they were at a like a crossroads because when 2010 hit, the hyper realism of the human designs didn't look all that great by that point. It's like they were limited and they looked kind of uncanny. Then 2011 with Puss in Boots, they were trying to be cartoonish, but still stick within that general CGI look for everything. And it was really weird because it's like, oh, this takes place within the same universe as Shrek, but the humans and Puss in Boots looked wildly different. And I think that was like for the better. But here, everything looks great. Just the human designs. Like DreamWorks has some of the best character animation out of many of the studios that exist right now. And
oh yeah,
while their human designs definitely vary depending on what project they're working on, like you won't say these humans look like they are from like the same ones as the Boss Baby. They have a very charming and pleasant look to them. Like we're at that point now where if you can't make appealing human designs in CGI, it better be because you had no time, the lack of talent, or money that's there because there's no excuse anymore.
Something else I really like about their character designs is the way they animate villains. And I'm not sure how big Jack Horner ranks in terms of villains, but at the very least, his design is brilliant.
I love Jack Horner. I think outside of, I mean, like a lot of the characters in this movie are great. I would argue that this has some of the best ensemble casts of characters, like from 2022. Jack Horner almost steals the show. And, well, for one, his backstory. I love his backstory. I love the line of, I'm not even from a fairy tale, I'm from a nursery rhyme. And he has an inferiority complex that fuels his like hatred for everyone. And he wants to get the wishing star to own all the magic in the world. And he has like all of the magical items from the world. Like there's Cinderella's slipper, the poison apples, the trident, which I assume is from like the Little Mermaid, a bunch of baby unicorn horns, a phoenix.
Half as big, but twice as sharp.
I love that they made a villain like this, and I am shocked that they did not do this at an earlier time. I think that would have helped instead of doing what the third and fourth film did, of just rehashing one of the villains from the second film and the third film, and then the fourth film taking out continuity and redesigning Rumpelstiltskin. And I mean, he looked fine and he was okay as a villain, but it was just like, oh, so a fairy tale character is the villain again. Here, I love the fact that it's a nursery rhyme character driven by spite, and he's a irredeemable monster. He might be one of the best and at the very least most dangerous villains DreamWorks has ever come up with. Yep. And I know that's kind of hard to rank because villains in DreamWorks movies are threats in entirely different ways depending on the movie.
Yeah, like some are on more the comedic side. Like I think both the villains from the Boss Baby movies, but then you have Gary Oldman's character from Kung Fu Panda 2, who is terrifying in all the right ways. And then this movie gives you two villains that are pretty worthy adversaries.
Yeah, so on top of Jack Horner, we have the wolf. And the wolf is this really cool assassin bounty hunter like character who uses these sickles. And Wagner Moura does such a great job with the character of the wolf, who we won't say who for those who haven't seen the movie yet, of who he is, and we'll hit that point when we get there. He is calm, suave, and extremely imposing, like from his introduction to his design. And he has like a sadistic, playful side to him where he's just like, can I get your, I don't do this too often, but can I get your autograph? And he pulls out the wanted poster and he's like, and you can just sign right here, like around dead. And from what Joel Crawford and the team talked about animation in his film, this was his first voiceover role. And he does a great job. He brings a menacing force, but there's like a playfulness, and he brings like a presence to the character every time he shows up in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they were kind of like working on the movie and like redoing a few things, Morta was very on board with whatever. He was like, I will do whatever. And he got so into character at moments that it scared the people working on the movie.
That's cool. I love hearing behind the scenes stories like that.
That's why I like going to Animation as Film, because they'll tell you stuff about that before you have to, get the Blu-ray or listen to the commentary and such. And he basically puts Puss in Boots on his back. He essentially takes his sword away from Puss, and Puss feels very vulnerable and realizing like, oh, I could actually die here. And then with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, they are pseudo antagonistic towards Puss in Boots and Kitty Softpaws.
I call them more foils and less antagonists, because even they have a pretty sympathetic arc too.
Of course, I'm like, at first it's like you think it's Puss in Boots against Goldilocks, Jack, and the Wolf, but it slowly starts to show of like how all of these characters are all side of the same coin, because Puss in Boots and Goldilocks sort of share the same arc in a lot of ways of why they want to go and get this wishing star. And one of the cool, fun tidbits of when they talked about Goldilocks and the Bears was how they took inspiration from Guy Ritchie films for these characters, which makes a lot of sense with how they talk to one another and have like a mix of threatening, imposing dialogue, but also a hint of comedy with their interactions. I loved Mama Bear and Papa Bear. I thought they were just the bee's knees in terms of like pseudo antagonists. Like Ray Winstone and Olivia Colman play well off of one another. I love when we get to hear Papa Bear at first when he's intimidating and threatening Mama Luna to tell them where Puss in Boots is. He's like, oh God, she's going to get like eaten. And then he's just like, excuse my madame, we're here to looking for the Puss in Boots. Can you help us find out where he is?
Nope,
or like,
too soft.
Yeah. And then Mama Bear is like doing things like trying out hats and such while they're looking for everyone. And Baby Bear is just getting the brunt of the jokes thrown at him, like all the punches and such. And it's just like, listen to your sister. She's not my sister. She's just a human. She's not even a bear. I loved because at first it was like the marketing kind of showed them off as threatening and imposing, but they're like amateur bounty hunters. They have no real skin in the game per se, if you know what I mean, like the experience of trained killers and such.
Compared to even like Puss and Kitty Softpaws, they're still relatively green.
Basically, Puss and Kitty are constantly telling them indirectly, get good. And then with Puss and Kitty, you find out that there was a little bit of history since the last movie, that they're still at each other's throats for an entirely different reason this time. And to round out our trio of heroes, we have Perrito, this very super optimistic little, I want to say Chihuahua, maybe.
They don't really specify, but
I felt so bad when they showed him the wanted sign and it said unwanted.
oh, that's a dark joke.
There are so many dark jokes that revolve around Perrito. Like, I was shocked, especially when they do the whole backstory of him saying, like, oh, they tried to get rid of me, but I found my way back. And then one day they just had it. And then they tossed me and my siblings in a river in a tied up bag with a rock in the bottom. And I was able to swim out of there. My siblings didn't make it. And everyone in the movie and outside the movie were like, holy shnikes, man. It's like, it's really sad. It's really funny, but it's also like, wow, yeah, people used to or sometimes still try to do that with animals. Like, yikes.
It's the delivery of the dialogue. He is so cheery while basically telling like this dark origin story. And Kitty's line after where she says like, that is the saddest funny story I've ever heard is kind of the perfect punctuation for his backstory.
I think they finally found a way to balance out the jokes and the drama of the Shrek franchise. The franchise has had this kind of inconsistent trouble of balancing out laughs and the emotions and such. The first movie was more on the drama side and still had jokes, but the jokes were very few and far between, or were very indirectly taking jabs at Disney. You know, you can listen to our episode where we talk about all that. The second one was probably the one at that point in time to find, like, do a lot of great jokes and a lot of great character beats. And then the third one was too drama driven and the jokes didn't land. Same with the fourth one. And then Puss in Boots, like, it was funny, but it was definitely more action adventure drama than like a straight up action comedy. And here, like, I found myself and my audience was laughing a ton throughout a mass majority of this own movie, especially when we find out like stuff like Jack Horner's backstory and such, where they do the whole nursery rhyme of how he puts his thumb in a pie, and then it pans over to Pinocchio. Being yeah, one of the few Shrek cameos that you see. You see Gingy, you see Shrek and Donkey through a non-vocal cameo,
which is totally making fun of the Lion King.
Yeah, and then Pinocchio shows up for like 5 seconds, and Jack Horner. As much as like I've had mixed feelings about John Mulaney as a whole, he was probably one of the few people who could have pulled this character off. Like, if you were going to get a celebrity, like a funny comedic celebrity, John Mulaney is probably one of the few who can bob and weave through like very dark, cynical jokes and line deliveries. Like Jack Horner, he is just the worst person in the room at all times.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to think of like another name who could have like struck the right balance between absolute pettiness but also genuine menace at the same time, and Mulaney just perfect.
He represents like the super like extreme alternative to Puss and his story, because Puss has multiple chances and opportunities to be selfish, but he realizes that he can't get this done without the help of Perrito and Kitty Softpaws. Jack is willing to let his Baker Dozen group die horribly.
We have to talk about the talking cricket.
Oh, yeah. So during one of the sequences of as they take their journey with the map, and the cool creative thing about the Wishing Star map is that whoever holds it, their path is entirely different. And Puss in Boots and Kitty Softpaws have this like horrific, terrible, Dark Souls level like challenge ahead of them. And then Perrito has just like, oh, like smell the roses, the Valley of Calmness, and like the Valley of Easy Solutions.
The River of Relaxation.
Yeah. Oh, I loved that whole reveal. And they're just like, let's just let Perrito take the map so they don't have to do any of that. But their challenges, they're still there. They're just not like all super flashy action and such because, they have to save room for all the flashy action set pieces as they get to that point. And as they get through these killer roses, Jack brings out this cricket who he thinks is like a locust. He's going to eat all the plants and such. And it turns out that the ethical bug, aka, like Jiminy Cricket, the talking cricket, or whatever from Pinocchio, voiced by Kevin McCann, I want to say trying to do the impression of the original Jiminy Cricket voice actor from back in the day.
He's honestly just doing a Jimmy Stewart impression.
That's what I was thinking as well. And I think that's perfect to do that for that character. And he's just like, well, I'm your conscience and I'm here to set you on the right path. And he keeps mentally scarring that little cricket by doing all these horrible things. And like the cricket tries his best to look at the bright side of everything. Like Jack Horner takes out the phoenix and the cricket will be like, oh, well, look, a phoenix, the symbol of reborn and renewed energy. And then he's horrified by how Jack uses it as a flamethrower. Or how it's just like, don't you have any soul? And Jack's like, no. It's just so funny. Like, Jack may almost steal the whole movie from everyone else. But I love the little witty, charming banter between Goldilocks and the bears. And then, like, every once in a while, like, as they get over a challenge, you hear the eerie whistle of the wolf, who is just constantly following them. And we get to a point where Puss not only has a panic attack, but shows like why there are service dogs, why there are therapy dogs and such. Like, it was a great moment and a lot of great moments in this movie where they find times to actually let the characters breathe for a moment and talk and banter and grow as individuals and what have you and such.
And this is where we find out what really happened between Puss and Kitty at Santa Colomba.
Okay. So you find out that they were going to get married, and until you find out something else, Puss ran away because, that's never a terrible thing to do at a wedding for the groom. He just didn't want to let her down. He just didn't want something bad to happen to her. And then you get the great punchline of Kitty's like, oh, no problem. I didn't show up either. It reminds you of that whole sequence from a SEAL Team. J.K. Simmons' character has like this tragic backstory. It's like, I'm the one who caused all this trouble because I cut the wrong wire. And then they're just like, yeah, we're colorblind. And he just like, he has that little mental snap of like, oh my God, I just wasted my entire life for nothing. I got to watch that movie again, man. That's a great one. Anyway, it's a good moment to see Puss in Boots, Kitty, and Perrito bond. And you learn this film goes over a lot of things. It goes through more like morality, death, just like life itself. It's a lot more complex than what the other films in the franchise were ever willing to do.
There's a lot of mature themes that this film tackles, and I can see why this is getting like as much critical praise as it's getting.
At one point, after like an amazing action sequence, and then just getting separated and having time to be with the Goldilocks and the bears, you find out that Goldilocks, she just wants to use the wishing star to have an actual family, which that was probably the most heartbreaking moment of the movie, because you can tell that they were very much a family, very tight-knit, close to one another, and had fond memories with like Goldilocks entering their life. And Goldilocks was very much willing to give that up because she felt like this wasn't a real family. As Puss in Boots gets separated from everyone, he goes into a cavern of illusions, the Cave of Lost Souls, where he interacts with his previous lives. And I still think the best way he lost a life was the whole like, a cat always lands on his feet. Watch.
That was funny.
Those 8 lives lost got a ton of laughs at Animation This Film and in my when I went to see the movie again.
Same.
And you find out during this junction in the story, the wolf shows up. And throughout this whole thing, you're kind of wondering why the wolf is after Puss. Who hired him? Who is he working for? And you find out that the wolf is actually Death, just following him. And it leads to that whole sequence where Death is like, sorry to crash the party with your past lives, or your past deaths, as I like to call them. I was there to witness all of them, each frivolous end. But you didn't even notice me because Puss in Boots laughs in the face of death, right? But you're not laughing now. You are no bounty hunter. You are Death. And I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically or any other fancy way. I am Death. Straight up. And I have come for you, Puss in Boots. It's like Death had his own vendetta towards Puss for not cherishing life. And he was essentially just going to take him. We don't get a lot of animated films, at least in the States, where morality is a major theme throughout the story. We've gotten like a few of them in the past few years, but it always seems like some studios are thinking the American audience, for some reason or another, are not ready for films for families or for everyone to talk about these things, at least in animation.
The closest we got, and this isn't even a good example because they're inanimate objects, but you know, we all kind of talk about that scene in Toy Story 3 where Woody and the gang are about to meet their end, the garbage place.
Yeah.
This is the first time where death and mortality is like pretty much front and center.
And I think that's really cool because I want films to do this. I want animation to keep doing this in the States because everyone in Europe and Japan and all over the world are like, oh yeah, we make like 5 of those in 1 month. And it was really cool to see something as whimsical and silly as something like Puss in Boots and the Shrek franchise actually tackle something like this. Because the last time they tackled death, it was in a extremely tasteless joke. Not tasteless, but just not a well-handled joke.
Not even a little bit.
So it was great to see them really redeem this like side of them. Like some of the best moments in a movie are when Death is talking to Puss in Boots. It puts Puss in Boots into the mind frame of like, yeah, I gotta stop taking life for granted because something could happen and it'd be all over. And that's that. And it's just really cool because I'm always worried at times when films and stuff tackle this stuff, like these certain topics, because I want them to do it, but I also don't want them to be flippant with it. You can make a story about anything. You just need to make sure it's written well.
This arc with Puss is so good that I didn't notice at all that there's like a scene with a misunderstanding where
the third act breakup.
I thought they were going to go in that direction. And thankfully it only lasts like a second where Kitty Softpaw says like, I knew you would double cross me like this. And then once he actually explains what's going on, 2 seconds later, Death shows up on the wishing star. And that leads into probably one of the best fight sequences that I've seen since Kung Fu Panda 2.
Yeah, so at first it starts up with Puss in Boots, Kitty, and Perrito fighting against Goldilocks, Jack Horner, the Bears, and Jack Horner's one last assistant from the Baker's Dozen. And unfortunately for her, she's taken care of rather quickly. It's just another sign of how terrible and heartless Jack is as a person. And then his like heartlessness also plays well against Goldilocks because there's like the threat of like the barrier around the star that like you could literally vanish into the magic ether or at least that's what I understood of why you don't want to touch the sides and such. And when Baby Bear is about to be taken, Goldilocks, like who had the map and could have said the wish, saves Baby Bear instead because she realizes that, hey, I found my family here. This is my family. I don't need a stinking wishing star to get that. And then Death shows up doing the same life flashing before your very eyes, Puss in Boots line, which has a thematic difference when the first time he says it to now. Because he fights Puss in Boots and he's about to kill him again. He does the life flashing line. And it's Puss having all these recent memories because he's cherished the memories of his interactions and what has happened on this journey. And gets into, probably the best fight in a DreamWorks animated film since the Kung Fu Panda films. And that's like 2016 when the third one came out. And I love the action sequences. I love these lower frame rate, the fast paced line work, and the duel of the wolf using his two sickles to make like one big weapon. And like we're in an era now where a ton of people working in animation are going to take cues and references and inspiration from like live action films and anime and like other pieces of animated media to inspire them with these sequences. And I'm just grateful for that because it just shows that the world of animation is evolving, like with what people put into it. And you think like, oh, I beat Death. That's not really the case. Death is just like, fine, I can't take you. I am annoyed, I am mad, but I will let you be. They'll know that we will meet each other again. It's like, it's such a poetic moment for the movie. And it's Puss in Boots. Movies can be weird. And I remember a line from Cinema Therapy, which I think is from either the Kung Fu Panda film or another film, like I think Megamind maybe. I don't care what's in your movie, but you have to convince me that I shouldn't focus too much on like the details that aren't really explained or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like if you break down Star Wars or Spider-Man, those are inherently silly ideas, but you don't care because they're well executed. And here it's like a cat with boots and a sword teaming up with another talking cat and a silly little dog go on an existential adventure of morality, life and death and family. And it's some of the most poignant emotional heartbeats of any animated film from 2022 from the big studios. And at first I was thinking it was almost a little undone when they had to bring back Jack Horner, but I loved the whole sequence of how they get rid of Jack Horner before Death shows up, where Kitty kicks him into that bottomless granny bag. And
I shouldn't have telegraphed that.
Yeah. And then of course they bring back the whole thing that he ate the magic cookie and the magic potion from Alice in Wonderland. I found myself multiple times when I'm getting a snack saying snacks the same way Jack Horner does. And I think that's just funny because I'm just like, snacks. Gosh darn it. And I love yes, there's a big version of Jack Horner, like a bigger version than normal that they have to fight. And I understand some people it didn't take too long afterwards for the movie to end after that.
That, and it's a great callback to what happens to the giant in like the intro.
I love as the star is crumbling in on itself and Jack tries to read the map and realizes a piece is missing and the last piece is owned by the cricket. And he's just like, this is my resignation letter. And he torches the map. And Jack is just like, what did I do to deserve this?
I mean, what specifically?
And then does like the whole like thumb going into the star, which could also be its own take on the Terminator film as well. And in a way, he gets his wish. He gets to be magic. The movie wraps up fairly quickly afterwards after that. Not in like a bad or rushed way. I'm not saying that. It's just like the story ends very closely after, where Goldilocks and the bears take over Jack Horner's pie factory. And the cricket is like, well, hello there. Let's talk about ethical business practices. And the bears is like, Mom, there's a scary talking locust on my nose. What is with this year and having 3 different animated or quote unquote animated films where the cricket from Pinocchio is treated terribly? Or at least I think like the Robert Zemeckis remake of Pinocchio treats him the least terrible. Where Del Toro's is like constantly getting crushed and is not able to sing his song until he dies, which is a delightful dark joke in of itself.
Oh yeah.
And this one, it's just like nobody wants to hear the morality of things. And then the last scene in the movie is Puss in Boots, Kitty, and Perrito. And I love how they finally pick his name. And like Puss in Boots was like gave him a very macho name.
Like
and
Chomper.
He's like, yeah, Chomper's a pretty cool name though. And then Perrito's like, yeah, no. So they steal the ship that's owned by the mayor from the beginning of the movie. And they say, oh, we're going to go meet some old friends. And it pans over to the ship going to far, far away.
With the theme song, too. Playing.
Yeah. On one hand, I'm a little disappointed that they're going back to far, far away. Just because I felt like Puss in Boots is like this weird oddity of a spin-off series to where it can be its own series without having to go back to the world of Shrek. But I get it. I get why they did it. I got over it very quickly. Because even I'll admit, I was like, they're going back to the Shrek world. But that's just like oh my gosh, the reality of there being a 5th Shrek movie is more real than ever now.
A lot of people, after they saw the movie, asked me about the end scene. And basically I told them, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, I don't know when they're going to make an official announcement about Shrek 5, but you don't put a scene like that at the end of this movie without a plan.
It seems like they're going to do that relatively soon. And by relatively soon, I mean like within the next few years.
Probably 2025.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate one because let me see what's next. This year we're going to have, well, we know we're getting a Trolls film called Trolls Band Together. But so far, I think that's relatively it. The Wikipedia has another film set for 2023 this year with Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. When stuff like this is on Wikipedia, you kind of have to take a lot of these things with a grain of salt.
It only says summer 2023. So you kind of know either it's going to move off of that date or they'll put out a trailer like tomorrow.
God, that's always going to be the case, isn't it? It's like we do these podcasts and then like a literal few days later, they say like, hey, whatever they do, the question is now that we are pretty much going to go back to the Shrek world, like franchise world. Are you excited? Are you more curious? Are you dreading about what is going to happen under the reign of Illumination? Like, how are you feeling? Like, would you like to go back to Shrek 5? Or would you rather they just do something else, like reboot the whole thing? Or like, what's on your mind now that they've kind of confirmed what's going on?
After what I've seen in this movie, and I've heard whispers about Shrek 5 being a total reinvention. Based on what I've seen from DreamWorks in general, starting this year, I am excited for the possibilities. And even with Universal's animation in general, we've talked about how great the Super Mario Brothers movie looks at Illumination. The future is bright for both studios right now.
I'm curious to see what happened. Like, I think I'm more like, I need to hear or see a little more of what could possibly happen or what the plan is for this new incarnation or continuation of the franchise. Because they pretty much hit a brick wall of like for Shrek's arc. So I don't know what they have to do or what they are going to do. And if they just decide to do something like, let's just be absurdly silly with this movie, so be it. I'd be down for that. I mean, DreamWorks is an entirely different beast from when they were in 2011. They still keep a few of the DreamWorks isms of like how you can tell it's a film made by them. But I feel like they're no longer just going to make a Shrek movie for the sake of just keeping the IP and the property with them and such. But I mean, who knows? We can only just wait and see. I wish I could say I know exactly what's going to happen, but I have no idea what's going to happen. And that's scary, but it's also kind of fun to see what they're going to do. And if I'm going to be excited, disappointed, kind of in the middle, we'll have to see. But in general, for Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, great movie. It's in my top 5 for animated films of the year. And like from the story, the writing, the action, the fantastic music by Heitor Pereira, who also did work for like The Road to El Dorado, Spirit, Stallion of Cimarron, Rango, Madagascar, and such. I can't wait to own this. I already have the art book pre-ordered. I can't wait to read through that to get some of the production notes behind it and to see all the behind the scenes features and commentary about this movie. Because I love this stuff. I love looking up behind the scenes stuff for animation and movies in general, because sometimes with certain productions, they want to make sure you don't know how the sausage is made. But in this social media age, I think it's okay to just show them how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about how this one came to be. And as far as where it lands in terms of my overall year, in my top 10 for sure.
I mean, like with a sequence, like when they're doing the whole chase sequence in the valley and Jack Horner pulls up the Excalibur, he's like, let me show you Excalibur. Yeah, you see the stone is still stuck to the sword because I couldn't pull the sword out, which got one of the biggest laughs out of the theater I was in. It's a fun time. Like, I think DreamWorks had a slightly better year than Disney in a lot of regards, even though I'm not always down for the whole competition between different studios. It's just that they've had a consistent year and a consistently great year.
I agree with that. I would say maybe Turning Red is better than The Bad Guys, but Puss in Boots is like, it's like pretty much up there with like some of the best animated movies of the year. I knew because I'd liked the first one so much that I was going to like this one too, but I didn't realize how much I would love this movie specifically within like the other films that came out this year. I was totally not prepared for that.
Like after seeing the first 30 minutes at Animation is Film, I was like, oh, we got something special here. Like I was thrilled. Because unfortunately, like the other work in progress thing I saw at Animation is Film was the one for Strange World. And I still liked Strange World. But I was like, okay, well, it's time to kind of wait and see what's going to happen with this one. But with Puss in Boots Last Wish, I was like, oh, they got a slam dunk here. It's about to come on to video on demand on January 17th, which is a huge bummer that it can't just stay in theaters for a little longer. Like, I get why companies are doing this, but I'm disappointed that they're forcing these movies out after a month. Or at my theater, like after a week or two. Like Empire of Light got kicked out of my theater, like right when Avatar came out. And that was like,
ouch.
Yeah, like I don't care if I wouldn't like Empire of Light if I saw it. I still wanted to see it. And that's the shame here. Like, if you feel safe, go see it. I highly recommend it, unless you don't have time to, then rent it or buy it on demand or when it comes out on Blu-ray.
All things being equal, you definitely should try to see this on the big screen because it is a good time at the movies.
Oh, it warrants the big theatrical screen experience, especially with all the visuals and just the vibrant colors. Oh, it's so pretty. But that's it for this review and discussion. Our next few episodes are going to be like, we're going to do a TV catch up episode where we talk about Sonic Prime. We're going to talk about Dragon Age Absolution, and we're going to talk about Lookism. And then, depending on when Netflix reveals what their lineup is for this year, we're going to do our 2023 animation guide, like then. And we do have connections to get a screener for New Gods Yang Jian, and we'll try to see if we can watch The Amazing Maurice in theaters. But I assume it's going to be there for like a week, and then it'll be on video on demand because it's Viva Kids, and I have yet to see one of their films actually make it to a theater that I'm close to.
Same.
No matter what year it is, I'm going to hope for the best for every animated film that comes out, because after 2022 and Netflix and HBO Max just canceling everything left and right, or saying we're not going to move forward with this, but you can take it somewhere else, it's like I'm going to root for it no matter what, or how, if I end up liking it or not.
One of my New Year's resolutions in 2023 is just root for animation to succeed.
Yeah, so just root for animation, y'all. Just like root for the people there. Don't drag them down. Don't harass them. Like, do better, because last year a lot of y'all did not do better. Be supportive of animation, and that includes the industry, because lordy, like Warner Brothers Discovery is still doing that friggin' Flash movie when that is like the worst idea to keep going forward with that. But they don't want more animation or Looney Tunes on HBO Max for some reason.
That Flash movie better be the best thing ever, or else none of this will be worth it. But
it won't be, but that's neither here nor there.
So before we get out of here, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, as long as that site's still going, at Cam's Eye View. I have a Hive, and you just look up Cam's Eye View. I have a website called camseyeview.biz where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. And I have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. That's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on Twitter and Hive at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser, on the Banana Meter. Listen to all of our podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.